Okay, let me just extend my screen so I can see you all as well. So welcome to this webinar today. My name is Taryn, and as Mike said, I'm a researcher development advisor at the University of Leeds. And what I specialise in is supporting researchers in thinking about their careers, whether those are careers in academia or whether those are careers outside of academia. You know, we want to support our researchers in whatever it is that they decide that they want to do. Now, we're here today to talk about kind of career planning and career planning with purpose. And I've called it career planning with purpose because people often think that career planning is just about looking for jobs and thinking what you might be good at and that's it. But planning with purpose is a bit different because it means taking the time to reflect about what's really important to you. So what we won't cover today is applying for jobs. We're going to think about the stage before that, because a lot of people launch into the job search without reflecting on what they want to do, where they really want to go. So you can kind of view today as the pre-job searching stage. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. This is a 2-hour session and there will be a scheduled break right in the middle of it. And there'll be tons and tons of time for reflection today. So I'd really encourage you to take the time that I give you in this session today to give you a chance to have a think. The presentation materials and the recording will both be made after this session. So if you see something on my slides and you think, oh, I didn't get time to make notes on that, don't worry, you will be sent those slides afterwards. I'd also recommend that you have resources for note-taking available, whether that's paper and pen or maybe typing on your phone or your laptop, anything like that. And you'll notice also that your microphones are muted and your cameras are switched off during this webinar. This is just because there are so many people online, it helps everything run smoothly. In terms of how you're going to engage today, I'm just hoping you can see my screen. I'm just double checking. Yes, you can. We really encourage active participation, whether that's taking notes or whether it's engaging during using the chat function. So if you're not too familiar with Zoom, at the bottom of the screen, you should be able to see a box that says chat. If you click on that, you can then type messages. Just check who you're sending it to, because sometimes it'll say to everyone or to hosts and panelists. If you want to share thoughts with the rest of the group, then make sure it's changed to everyone. So why don't we actually give that a test now? If you're feeling confident to do so, please let me know where you are watching from today and maybe what the weather's like where you are. So feel free to just use the chat to share where you're calling in from and what the weather's like. And we'll see if... Oh, hello, Simona. Welcome from York. Yes, I'm very close by in Leeds. The weather is terrible and grey here as well. I've got more people from Leeds, Cape Town. Seems like a cloudy day today. Windy but warm, I'll take that. Auckland, oh, Pretoria is very hot and sunny. Oh, I'd love that right now. It's very grey here. A bit of a mixed day. So we've got lots of people from South Africa, lots of people from the UK, Vietnam, New Zealand, Australia, Lagos in Nigeria, warm and sunny. I'm very jealous. We're heading into autumn and winter here in the UK, and the weather is very stereotypically British today. So you know how to use the chat, you know how to engage with that. Feel free to use that, ask any questions. And what I would say is if you want to ask a question, just put a Q at the beginning of your message so we know it's a question, so I can make sure that I answer all of those where possible. At the end of this session, there'll be a feedback form and your responses will help identify topics of interest for future sessions. So let us know what you thought of today. As I said before, today will include loads of thinking time, and I'd like you to see today as a kind of start of the process of career planning, but I am going to ask some difficult questions. Difficult because you may just not have thought about them before. So don't worry when I'm asking you these questions. I do not expect you to have all the answers. For many of you, you'll need to go away and have a think a little bit more after this session, and that may take time, and that's absolutely fine. Career planning is often more complicated than we think, and it takes a little bit more time than we think. So remember to be patient with yourself. So let's think about career paths first of all. Often when I work with researchers, they think that career planning kind of works like this. You set a career goal maybe 10 years in the future or something like that, and then you just have to gradually work towards it, and that's it. That's career planning. But we all know in reality, careers aren't like this at all. Careers are a little bit more like this. They're a little bit more squiggly and wiggly. There's all sorts of things going on. Maybe you set a goal in the future, but there's an unplanned setback and you can't, it gets in the way. Or maybe there's an unexpected opportunity which pushes your career forward faster than you expected. Maybe personal circumstances mean that work takes a back seat, is not a priority for a while. And this is the reality for everyone. So the key message that I'd really like you to take away from today is that you do not need to have your entire career planned out step by step. However, it helps to get in the process of doing this occasionally, of thinking about what your goals are and what you're working towards, because they help give you an idea of where you want to go. So how does career planning actually help? Well, the first thing that it's really useful for is helping you figure out what's important to you. What do you actually want to do? What drives you? It helps you figure out what careers interest and excite you, because it's not just about what you're good at or what you can do. It's thinking about what interests you, what excites you. It's thinking about finding that job that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning and get going. And as we'll talk about right at the end of today's session as well, career planning also helps you think strategically about career decisions and helps you manage your time a little bit better. So we're going to start off in this session on career planning with purpose with thinking about what gives you purpose. Now, this feels like a very big philosophical question, but it's a really important one because, as I said before, whenever we think about our careers, often the first question we ask ourselves is, what do I have the skills and experience to do? It's all about what can I do? But this is actually quite a limiting way to think about your career. And ideally, the first question I would ask you is, or I would ask myself is, what do I want to do? So in the first part of this session, we're going to spend some time reflecting on what's important to you. Amira and Joy, I think there's a document that you can add into the chat for me, but don't worry if you can't access it. There'll also be something on the screen for you just now. So what you want to start to do is to think about seeing yourself as a whole person, not just the work you, but also the personal factors, what's important to you and what really matters. And a good way to start with that is by thinking about what are your values. So there are a number of values here on the screen, but the One team have also very helpfully added a document into the chat, and you can use that instead if you prefer. What I would encourage you to do, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and in that 5 minutes, I'm going to give you time to pick your 10 top values. And before you begin doing this, I would like to be clear, don't choose the values that you think others want you to pick or that are important to other people. You need to pick the 10 values that truly resonate with you. This is a very personal exercise and you don't have to share it with anyone if you're not feeling comfortable doing so. So take the time, take 5 minutes and pick those 10 top values. And what I'll do is I'll also put these instructions in the chat for you. So we will come back at 18 minutes past the hour. Okay, hopefully you have 10 top values there. What I'm now going to ask you to do is I'm going to give you 90 seconds to pick from those 10 your top 5 values. So try and whittle that down to a top 5. And finally, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to pick your top three values. So we'll settle on final three values. Okay, now for some of you that might have been quite an easy exercise, particularly if you've done something like that before, but for some of you that might be quite challenging. But thinking about your values is really, really important. We often think of values as something that are a bit vague or wishy-washy or just nice to have, but values and your core values guide how you act and what's important to you and how you live your life. So of course, they're going to have an impact on your career, the way you work, and the kinds of work you're looking for. So it's really important to think about how your values align with the job you do now and the jobs that you want to do in the future. I'll give an example. My core values are balance. So it's really important to me to have a good balance between all the different elements of my life. I don't want to spend all my time at work, but I do want, do want to enjoy my work. Knowledge, I love learning. It's a real core value for me. I just love learning new things. It really guides me. But it's also important to me to do meaningful work as well. So it's really important that when I get to the end of my life, I feel that I've made some kind of meaningful difference with my work. When I was doing my PhD absolutely met the need for knowledge. I was learning so much. I was learning so quickly, but I didn't have balance. I was working a lot. I did not have good work-life balance. And while I loved the work, I didn't feel that it was making a difference in the world. It didn't meet my needs for meaningful work. But now I'm working in an area where it still scratches that itch for knowledge. I'm still learning new things all the time, but I have much better balance in my life. And I also feel like I'm making a difference by supporting researchers, that it meets my core values in a much more aligned way. And as a result, I'm much happier now because my career aligns with my core values. So I'm just going to give you a minute to reflect and to think about the current role that you have and to what extent that current role aligns with your values. And if this is quite an easy question for you, then you might want to sit back and think of previous roles you've had in the past as well. Which of those aligned most with your values? Which aligned least with your values? And how did that influence your experience of them? So I'm just going to give you a minute to have a think about your current role and how that's aligning with those values that you've just centered on. This is an exercise that I often do with researchers. We go through their career history and we look at what roles aligned with their values and what roles didn't. And this can be a really useful thing about thinking about what careers are right for you and what kind of work is right for you. Because no matter how much you might have the skills for a job, if it does not align with your values, you're going to feel it. You're going to notice it after a while that something feels off and you're not quite sure why. So we've thought first about values. The next thing is to think about, what do you really enjoy doing? So another exercise that I often do with researchers, and we will do this in just a minute, but I'm going to give you an example first, is the stop, keep, add activity. And this activity essentially asks to transform your current role into your ideal job. What tasks would you stop, keep, and add? So for me, I would probably stop all finance related tasks. I don't like managing budgets. I find it really boring personally. I can do it and I'm quite good at it, but it doesn't interest me. So my ideal job would not have any finance related aspects whatsoever. On the other hand, I would keep all the work I get to do running workshops like this because I absolutely love it. I find it really, really fun. And if I was to think about what I would add, I would probably add more strategic work, working with other people across my university and across the sector, starting to do some of this, but I'd like the opportunity to do even more because I really enjoy it. So take a second and just have a little bit of a think about your ideal career, turning your current role into your ideal job. What tasks would you stop, keep, and add? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to make some notes on that. Write that down somewhere, and feel free to add it into the chat if you feel comfortable doing so. So I'll give you just a few minutes to do that, and then we will talk about how values and interests help with your career planning. So if you've made a note of what you'd stop, you'd keep, and you'd add, feel free to add that into the chat. What tasks do you wish you didn't have to do? What tasks do you really enjoy doing? And what tasks would you like to do more of, or would you like to add to your skill set? These might be things that you've never done before, but you've always wanted to have a go at. So feel free to write those answers into the chat now. So Faith would like to keep sharing about her research, maybe add managing grants and courses to it. I would like to stop having to write peer review publications. If I can tell the science story to someone and they write it, that would be great. Yeah. So Simona, you like the really researchy stuff. Latasha would stop administrative work, keep teaching, keep research, keep community engagement, and add networking and collaborating. Chandima would like to stop long, unnecessary meetings. Yes, I very much understand that one. I'm sure a lot of people do. Eric says the difficulty is there could be things you enjoy doing, but you don't know these things exist. The unknown unknown. Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll talk about this a little bit towards the end of this session. Amy would stop teaching, presenting, and doing face-to-face data collection. She would keep learning, statistics, organizing, and being responsible for myself, and add public engagement, coding skills, and working from home. This is a really useful exercise to get you thinking what kind of work works for you, because if you realize that actually a lot of the stuff that you'd like to stop are core parts of your job, that may suggest that that job is not quite working for you. I see quite a few trends in that quite a lot of people would stop doing the administrative stuff. A lot of people are really enjoying doing the research. A lot of us are thinking about more opportunities to kind of lead or take the initiative on things as well. Lots of different examples there, but do you notice as well from those examples in the chat, everybody is different, everybody's doing different things, everybody's interested in different things. And this is a key part that you have to remember as well when you're thinking about your career, is you've got to think about what is important individually to you. So take a look at that your answer to that stop, keep, add activity and think, okay, what would that role look like if I had a role that stopped doing those things I don't like, that kept doing things I did like and added those other bits? What kind of role are you looking for? Are you looking for something really similar to what you do now, or are you looking for something totally different? Now, when we bring all of those together to think about your ideal career, a lot of career-related unhappiness kind of originates from a misalignment between your values, what you enjoy doing, and the actual work that you do day to day. So the first part of career planning with purpose involves understanding what your purpose is. And by that, I mean what your values are and what interests you. So your ideal career should align quite well with both of those. We've started to do this today. We've started to think about this a little bit today, but this is going to take a little bit more time for you to think about. So what I would really encourage you to do after today is spend a little bit more time on these activities and think about them in a little bit more detail. The next thing we're going to think about are, what are your goals? What are you working towards? Because once you understand your purpose better, a big part of career planning is having goals to help you achieve that purpose. Goals can be really, really useful. They give you direction and focus, and they help you to figure out your priorities too. What I would say though, and we will come to this later, they're more of a general sense of direction. They're not a tick list of things you absolutely have to do. They're not a specific job title. Then they're also not, you're not stuck if you decide that they don't work for you anymore. So we will talk for the rest of this session about setting goals, using goals to make a plan, and thinking about what if that plan doesn't work out. So I often have discussions with researchers who are thinking about their next career moves where I say, what's your career goals? What are your career goals? And often they mistake career goals with research goals, and the two are slightly different. Research goals consider more what you want to work on, and they tend to revolve around solving a specific problem or question. But career goals are slightly different. Career goals focus more on how you want to work, and they kind of act as a guiding compass for your career. So a research goal might be something along the lines of, I'd like to complete data collection on this area, or I'd like to publish this paper on this, or I'd like to develop a new framework for understanding Z. They tend to be research focused, but career goals are focused on you as the individual. So a career goal might be something like, I'd like to become an established leader in this particular area, or I'd really love to develop interdisciplinary collaborations with someone else. Or maybe if you want to leave research, you may say, my career goal is to transition into a data science role. So there is a slight difference between the two of these. And goals, people tend to think, generally, I think when people tend to talk about goals, they tend to focus on these long-term career goals. Things are going to happen 10 to 20 years from now. But a key part of career planning is thinking about goals at a number of stages. So you've got those long-term career goals, but you're also going to have medium-term career goals, which are things you'll achieve in the next, say, 2 to 5 years. And those short-term career goals, which you should be aiming to achieve in the next 6 to 12 months. And ideally, these should all be achievable within these given timeframes. So let's start off with that long-term career goal. I'm going to ask you another difficult question here. So I'm going to give you a decent amount of time because I'd like you to really sit back in your chair, cast your mind forward into the future, and really think about this. So my question to you is, it's 20 years from now and you're feeling fulfilled in your career. You're in a career that's aligned with your values and which really interests you. So I'd like you to sit back for a few minutes and think and try and paint as vivid a picture in your mind as possible and think, what does your work life look like? Who are you working with? And what impact are you having? Sit back for a couple of minutes and then write your answer to this down somewhere. These are hard questions, and I don't expect you necessarily to have an immediate answer now, but use those values and that stop, keep, add activity we just did to help create this kind of future snapshot. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to sit back, to have a think, and to think about writing this down so you're clearly answering those questions on the screen. So I'll give you 5 minutes, and as always, I'll put the instructions into the chat as well. It wouldn't be fair for me to ask you to do this without giving you my own example. So if I think 20 years in the future, which is, gosh, 2045, imagine that. 2045, I am a co-head of a team supporting researchers. I work collaboratively with my other co-heads, and we're improving the learning experience and the confidence of researchers at a university or a research organization, and we are nationally renowned for providing high quality support. I'm co-head because I don't spend all my time at the university. I spend some of my working time running my own business in research and development and kind of consulting at other universities. And what this for me allows me to do is it allows me to achieve those core values of knowledge. I get that balance between different elements in my working life, and I'm doing meaningful work as well. So it's helping me to achieve those values. As little financial work involved as possible, because I don't like that, but lots of work supporting individuals as well. So it's all aligning with what I've said before about my own values and my own interests. Do feel free, if you're comfortable, to share your own answer in the chat, but I'm very aware that these can be very personal snapshots of what your future might look a little bit like. This is a nice thing to do though, because often when we're thinking about our career, particularly if you are an early career researcher where things can feel quite precarious, you might not feel like you have the space to think 20 years forward. But by thinking forward, it can help you to start to make a plan. It can help you start to think, okay, I know where it is I want to go. How am I going to use the 20 years ahead of me to get there? So taking that future snapshot that we've just worked on, how do we translate that into a nice long-term goal? If you were to rewrite just what you've just written into something that looks a bit more like a goal, you might start it off with, in 20 years, I will what, or I will be doing this, or I will be doing that. And so what I'm going to ask you to do now is take a few minutes to turn that future snapshot into something that looks a bit more like a goal. Now, a good goal should be realistic. There should be a good chance that you can actually achieve it in 20 years. You know, if your goal is in 20 years, I would like to travel to the sun, then we probably need to think about the reality of that. Whereas if it's in 20 years, I'd like to, I'm trying to think of an example on the spot now. In 20 years, like I said, I'd like to be co-head of the research development team. I can see a pathway towards that. It feels a little bit more realistic. Again, similarly, is it achievable? Can you reasonably achieve it in 20 years? And if you think actually you can't, then you might need to work it back a little bit. And a key thing when you're thinking about your long-term goal here is, how will you know when you've achieved it? So if we take my snapshot, for example, where I was talking about being a co-head and all of that kind of thing, if I turn that into a long-term goal, I would maybe say something along the lines of, in 20 years, I will be co-leader of a collaborative team improving research and development at a European university while balancing my time as a freelance consultant. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do this exercise again. And what I would say is, have a good go at doing this yourself. But if you're really struggling to articulate your future snapshot into a goal, one quick thing you can do is write that future snapshot into a generative AI tool like ChatGPT or Copilot and see what it comes up with. Kind of use it as a little bit of inspiration for how you can turn this into a realistic, achievable goal. So I'll write the instructions in the chat again, but again, give yourself a few minutes to try and turn this into an actual goal for you to work towards. Hard questions, right? Really hard questions. And I don't expect this to be an easy process for you. But the reason I am doing this today is, if we think about career planning with purpose, we talked first of all about the purpose in terms of your values and your interests. But career planning with purpose also means that career planning in a way in which you're clear about where you're moving forward to. Often as early career researchers, as I said earlier, you have such precarious contracts and you're thinking constantly just about the next role, maybe the next role after that. You don't have as much scope to think really far forward. But if we want to be career planning in a way that is doable in the long run, we need to think about what our long-term career goals are. So Olamide, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, says, in 20 years, I aspire to be a recognized consultant, collaborating with design firms, educational institutions, and development organizations to design environments that inspire children's play, creativity, and learning. That is an absolutely beautiful 20-year goal. I think that's absolutely fabulous because it feels realistic. We can see what it feels, we can kind of see what that might look like as a job or as a career. It feels achievable, because there's clear things about there, collaborating with design firms, designing environments, and it's pretty easy to know when you've achieved it as well, because there's a clear set of specific things that you're going to be doing as part of that career. So thanks so much for sharing that. That's a really, really clear, lovely goal there. What I'm going to do now is I am going to give us time for a short break because we have been thinking about some tough things. We've been thinking about some difficult questions. And so you might want to use that break either to just give yourself a break for a few minutes and have a little bit of a think, or alternatively, you might actually want to use that break to keep thinking about your goals as well, keep developing that kind of 20-year snapshot a bit further. So we are going to come back at 5 minutes past the hour. So in the UK, it'll be 9:05, but it will be 5 past wherever you are too. So I will see you all back here in just over 10 minutes. Okay, so hopefully you've all had time to grab a drink, have a bit of a break, look out the window, all of those kinds of things. I think being online for a couple of hours can be quite tiring. So hopefully you're feeling a little bit more rested as we go into the second half of the session. Before we move on, remember that if you have any questions or any thoughts, you can add those into the chat. So if anybody has any questions, please do ask them and I will answer them at any point during the webinar. We're going to take some time now to think about how you work towards your goals, because career planning with purpose means having some goals to work towards, and once you have a slightly longer term goal, the next step is to think about how you can achieve them. Now, the work we did before the break, you may be thinking, I don't have a very concrete goal at present. Don't worry if that's the case, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we turn that goal into a more realistic plan. And what you can always do after today's session is you can go away and have a little bit more of a think about what that goal is, and then do some of this work again later on, because you'll be provided with all the slides and the recording after today, so you can always come back to this and do it all over again once you're a bit clearer about that plan. Now, we talked about different types of goals, and I see that long-term career goal. I see it almost as, imagine you're planning to climb a mountain. The long-term goal, that thing you're going to achieve 10 to 20 years ago, 10 to 20 years from now, is what I would see as the summit of the mountain. Imagine you're looking at a mountain far away. That is your long-term career goal. You're going to achieve that, but it's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a lot of time. I see medium-term goals as kind of the various base camps that you stop at on your way. They're the things that you do that make you realize you're making progress. They're not quite the summit yet. And those short-term goals are a little bit like the individual steps you take between all of those base camps, the things that the individual steps day by day that you take to get there. So the next thing we need to think about is, what do you need to do to achieve that long-term career goal, aka your medium-term career goals? What do you need to do to achieve those medium-term career goals, aka your short-term career goals? And those short-term career goals are like your step-by-step guide to achieving those larger goals. So by actually setting goals, a career development plan comes out of this, because those short-term career goals are much easier step-by-step things. Once you've achieved those, the medium-term goals get achieved, and those help that long-term career goal get achieved. So it's kind of a cascading effect. The short-term goals lead you all the way up to those long-term goals. So let's look at an example of how this might work in terms of career planning. Say that I want to stay in research, and that my long-term career goal is to lead an interdisciplinary research group in, let's make up a topic, or I don't know, transport studies. I want to lead an interdisciplinary research group in transport studies. That's going to take some time. That's a realistic goal for 10 or 20 years' time, but what am I going to need to do in the next 2 to 5 years to enable that to happen? Well, the first thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to secure independent research funding. If I want to lead my own group, I need to fund it somehow. So that's going to be one of my goals. I'm also, if I want to work in an interdisciplinary way, I'm going to need to build collaborations across disciplines in transport studies and other areas. Otherwise, my group won't be interdisciplinary. And if I want to lead a group, I'm going to be needing to lead people. So within the next 2 to 5 years, maybe I'm going to want to have supervised my first PhD researcher to get some supervision and leadership experience. So those are my medium-term goals, the things that they're a little bigger. I'm not going to achieve them immediately. They're going to take time, but they're kind of medium-term. But then I need to think about those medium-term goals. Well, what am I going to do in the next year that's going to help me to achieve them? Maybe one of the things that could help with securing independent research funding is maybe I need to publish a couple of papers on the topic to show that I'm an expert in this area. If I think about building collaborations across disciplines, how am I going to do that in the next year? Maybe I need to present at some workshops or conferences in the area and make some connections that way and allow me to showcase my research and network with other people. And if I want to supervise my first PhD researcher, maybe in the next 6 or 12 months, maybe I could supervise an undergraduate student, maybe on a summer project or something like that, and get my first experience of supervision. So can you see here how we go from a very big and a little bit more general research goal, that long-term one, down through the medium-term goals into the short-term goals, which feel a little bit more doable, feel a little bit more realistic, feel a little bit more like that step-by-step guide. Those are what good short-term goals should feel like. Let's try another example. Maybe I want to leave academia. Maybe I want to become the director of a major cultural institution supporting the preservation and communication of cultural heritage. That's a big job. That's going to take me 10 or 20 years to achieve. So what do I need to do in the next 2 to 5 years to achieve that? Maybe I'm going to need to gain a managerial role in a similar type of institution, because I can't become the director without managing some sort of smaller institution. Maybe I've got collections management expertise, but I need to develop it further within the next 5 years to showcase myself as an expert in that area. And if I'm thinking about cultural heritage, well, I'm obviously going to need to build partnerships with community groups and artists. Those are those kind of medium-term goals, things that I can achieve in the next 2 to 5 years that'll help me get there. So what do I do in the next 12 months to achieve that? Well, I could volunteer or work part-time in a local museum, get a little bit of experience in that sector. Maybe I need to take a course in collections management to develop my expertise in that area further. And maybe I can start to build partnerships by working with a local community group to produce an exhibition. Again, can you see how we've moved from a major goal, that big long-term goal, that peak of that mountain, a long-term way? These are our kind of base camps along the way, and these are our individual steps that we take to get there. Now, in reality, there won't be 3 of these, 1 of these. You're likely to have one major goal, a few medium-term goals, and then each of these will have a number of short-term goals. So you can end up with quite a few short-term goals, but I'm just showing a kind of simplified version here. Overall, though, those short and medium-term goals should provide you with concrete steps to help you achieve your long-term goal. They should almost provide that they should essentially, those short-term goals in particular, should essentially provide your 12-month plan for what you need to be doing in the next year. So this is how we move from thinking about kind of very big goals to developing a career development plan. So if we come back to this kind of career goal canvas and we work backwards, before the break, you thought about what your long-term career goal is. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a few minutes, and I'm going to give you a good 5 minutes, because this, again, these are difficult questions, so I'm going to give you a decent amount of time. I'd like you to think, what 2 or 3 steps do you need to take in the next, say, 5 years to help you achieve that longer term career goal? So for example, I'm just going to draw on the example that Olamide gave earlier. So again, his long-term goal was, in 20 years, I aspire to be a recognized consultant collaborating with design firms, educational institutions, and development organizations to design environments that inspire children's play, creativity, and learning. So if that's where you want to be in 20 years, what do you need to do in the next 5 years? What 2 or 3 steps are going to make that a more realistic goal? So again, I'll write the instructions in the chat. Take 5 minutes to have a really good think and start to draft some ideas for what those medium-term goals might look like. Okay, so hopefully you've started to get towards a few steps that will help you achieve those long-term career goals, things that you can achieve in the next 5 years. What we're going to do again is something a little bit similar. We're going to think now, I'm going to give you a few more minutes to think about what steps do you need to achieve those medium-term goals. And it may be, say that you've come up with 3 medium-term goals. It may be that each of those goals has a number of short-term goals. Remember, though, that these things should be achievable within the next 12 months. So don't write yourself so many goals you think, oh no, how am I going to achieve these all? Make sure overall it still feels like realistic process. So essentially what we're doing here is backwards planning, starting with where you want to be in the future and gradually moving back through time to think what can you do in the next year? So again, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to think about what short-term steps in the next year can you take to help achieve those longer-term career goals, those medium-term career goals first of all. These are difficult things I'm asking you to do, and as Simone has put in the chat, it can feel a bit overwhelming actually, which is why obviously we have to be responsible about our use of AI, but generative AI can be a really useful tool if you want to think about your goals. Particularly, I think, and let's be realistic here, some of you may be in a position where you don't feel that you can talk to others about these career goals. And so I always think generative AI, if used responsibly, can almost act like having someone there to bounce your ideas off of and to help you reformulate some of your goals into more realistic steps. So do try that out, obviously bearing in mind the ethical use of AI and being careful about what you share with it. One of the things that people often find when they're setting goals, and when I work with researchers, we often have this issue, is that for many of them, they're still very general, and it's difficult to understand what they actually mean. So, for example, often like someone might say to me they have a short-term goal to broaden my network, but I always say to them, but what does that mean, and how will you know when you've achieved it? So, the next thing you need to think about is, how you make those goals happen. And so when you're thinking about your goals, and this is not something we're going to do today, but I've added a resource in the chat for you that you can use to help plan your short-term goals out in a little bit more detail, is to think about what exactly do you need to do in that goal? Who can help or support you, and when do you need to do it? What's the deadline? And it ends up looking a little bit like this. So say I said that I needed to publish 2 or 3 papers. What exactly do I need to do? What's the task involved when I need to finish writing whatever paper it is, and I need to submit it to that journal. Those are my 2 steps. Who can help me? Maybe my supervisor can help me, maybe my project collaborator can help me. And when do I need to do this by? By February 2026. Now we're getting into the detail. Now we're really getting into the point where we can actually really develop a really comprehensive plan of what needs to be done. Because often when people develop plans, I would say they feel more like a wish list. Like, I would like to broaden my network, or I would like to develop my coding skills, but there's no real specifics, no real details behind that. And that makes it very difficult to get these things done. So as I said, I've added a kind of brief document with a little table into the chat. And what I would really encourage you to do is, once you've really settled on what your short-term goals are, put them into this table to create yourself a plan. One final point that I'd like to make here, which is a little bit away from what we've been talking about, but it's relevant to thinking about your plans, is that when people build these development plans, these career development plans, often what they need to do is just listed as, I need to take a course in this, or I need to read this book, or I need to do this workshop or something like that. But remember that learning and career development is not just about what we call formal learning, aka kind of things like this. So things like courses and workshops. At Leeds, we subscribe to what we call the 70-20-10 model of development. And this is this notion that actually only 10% of your development time will really be spent on that kind of formal learning, taking a course or sitting in a webinar like this. 20% of your time is going to come from what we call peer or social learning, talking to people, being mentored or being coached, speaking to colleagues in your area and learning from those experiences. And actually, most of your learning comes from what we call experiential or on-the-job learning. Most of your development will be through utilizing these things in your work day to day. So when you're working on your plan, just bear that in mind, and remember that it's not enough in a career development plan to just say, I'm going to do a bunch of courses, because development is much more complicated and complex than that. So as we head into the final session of today, I want to take a little bit of a sidestep, because I think it was Eric asked a question earlier about what unknown unknowns, I think was the phrase he used. You know, there's a lot of things that you don't even realize are out there. So we'll touch on that a bit in this next section, because you can have a career development plan, right? You can have it all planned out. And as I said at the beginning of today, life sometimes gets in the way. So when you're setting your goals, the first thing I want to remind you is that these goals are more about providing a general sense of direction. They are not a set, unchanging list of tasks that you have to complete, and they are not a source of failure if you don't achieve them. So what I would really encourage you to do is review those goals at least once a year and think really hard, are they still relevant? Are they still interesting? I talked earlier about that long-term goal as a mountain that you're planning to climb, but you might get to one of your base camps one day and realize that mountain peak isn't really that interesting to you anymore. There's another mountain you like to climb instead. And career planning is exactly like that. Remember, careers are not as straightforward as we take them for. You know, when I was doing my PhD, up until about halfway through my PhD, I was absolutely sure that I wanted to be an academic, and all my career goals were aligned with that. Halfway through my PhD, I realized I didn't want to be an academic. It didn't align with my values. It didn't align with my interests. That wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. And so I had to completely rethink what it was that I was going to do. So in the final part of today, we're going to think, what do you do if your original goals don't work out? Maybe it still interests you, but your goals just aren't happening. It doesn't feel like it's working for you. Or what if you just change your mind? The key thing here is to consider what other plans and ideas genuinely interest and excite you, because often we treat plan B, plan C, plan D as, I'll do them if I have to. But what we want those backup plans to be is we want them to be genuinely interesting and genuinely exciting. So I'm going to give you just 1 minute to think. Think about all those goals you've created over the course of this session today. Say they're no longer an option. You cannot do that plan at all. What's your plan B? Have a think for just a minute. What would you do instead? And do feel free to add your plan Bs into the chat if you want to. For me, I'm very aware that with my kind of plan A, universities are financially strapped. And so for me, it might be that I can't be a freelance consultant because there just isn't enough, maybe in the future, there just isn't enough work to make that financially viable. So my plan B would be to remain working full time in a university or a research organization in researcher development. Let's ask a harder question. If your plan B was not an option either, what would you do instead? What's your plan C? So as before, take a minute to think about, okay, plan A is not an option, plan B is not an option. What am I going to do instead? There's a question in the chat. I have trouble planning plan B because I don't know when plan A will fail and when I need to start plan B. Do I need to plan when to start plan B and plan C? That's a very good question. I would never assume that plan A is going to fail. Ideally, if you've done that canvas that we've created, it maximizes the chance of plan A working out. What I'm asking you to think about alternative options for is not because I necessarily expect you to have them planned out in the same detail, but because people are often thrown when their plan A doesn't work out because they feel like they don't have any other options. So the reason I'm asking you to think about these are because having additional plans means you can quickly adapt if this happens. So what really helped me during my PhD when I realized I didn't want to be an academic was I did a lot of work thinking about what could I do instead. And I did a lot of the things we've done today. I did an activity where I looked at what my values were. I thought about what are my interests, and I started doing a lot of research, and we'll talk about this in just a second. So don't feel like your plan B has to be planned out as much as possible as plan A. What it does help to know is that you have realistic alternatives, things that really interest you if plan A doesn't work out. Because I've seen many people stick to plan A for a long time, even when it's clearly not working out, because they feel like they don't have any other good options. They've made plan Bs or plan Cs perhaps, but they don't really want to do them. So hopefully that's helpful. Don't worry too much about planning it. It's more just about thinking about other things that you'd like to do. So for me, obviously my plan B would be to work in research development full time. Let's say that doesn't work out at all. Then my plan C is to work in learning and development outside of academia, for example, in a corporate environment. I have lots of plans all the way down to set up my own bookshop, which I would really love to do, to be honest. But these are one of the things that help me feel a little bit more secure in my career, is that I know I have backup options that really genuinely interest me and that wouldn't feel like a backup option, but they'd feel like a great option in their own right. But this is really challenging. There are a few things that you can do to help you think about what alternative routes might be available to you. The first is to think about, okay, is there an alternative route towards your long-term goal? So a classic example here is, say that in the long run, you want to become a project manager for a startup. That's where you want to be, but something doesn't work out and you can't quite make that direct leap. Are there other options? Could you switch some of your medium and short-term goals to make it a slightly more gradual move? For example, becoming a project manager in academia before then moving to a startup, or being a researcher in a startup before moving before moving to a project manager role. This is always one of the things we think about. We can get stuck on those goals, but it can help to think about, are there alternative routes towards that same track? I often think about this in terms of academia. So a lot of people would like to have a permanent position in academia, and for some people, they will make their way all through academia, whereas some people will need to leave academia, gain experience elsewhere before they can come back to move on that way. Eric's posted here, a struggle is that sometimes you feel very much invested in your plan A, although to no avail, and you feel it will work out at the end of the day. The longer the time into your original plan, the harder to move to alternative routes. Absolutely, Eric. I completely understand and I completely empathize with that. And it can be hard. But thinking about plan B and plan C really seriously and really actually giving it some time to think about what other options are open can actually mean that you may be, if your plan A is not working, it can help you adapt more quickly rather than staying on a track that isn't working for you. But it is hard emotionally. It is very difficult when you're invested in an idea and it doesn't work out. I have been there, and it took me much longer than I wish it had done to move into another route. And I know some of my colleagues have had the exact same thing. This is why it's important to have those options and options that are exciting to you as well. Another good thing to think about, and this is really useful, is Eric, you talked earlier about unknown unknowns. A really good way of figuring out what those alternative options are is by figuring out what other people have done. This can be as simple as talking to people in other areas and finding out what kind of jobs they do. But there is a really nice tool on LinkedIn that you can also use to help you out, and it's called the alumni function. So if you've got a LinkedIn account, you can, for example, go to any university. So, for example, I've gone to the University of Leeds here. I've gone to the alumni tab here, and it shows all the alumni from the University of Leeds who are on LinkedIn. There will be more, but these are the ones that are on LinkedIn. And what you can do is you can click through these to drill down into what they've studied and what they do now. And once you click these, it'll come up underneath with lots of profiles of people. So say, for example, you're studying history, you could click history. Then say, for example, you're interested in media and communication, you can click that and it will come up with everybody who went to the University of Leeds, who studied history, who now work in media and communication. And this can give you, and you can go looking on people's profiles and see what kind of careers they've gone into. And this can be really useful if you're not sure what people in your area, if you're not sure what other alternative career routes they've pursued, this can give you a little bit of inspiration. Before we move on, I just want to highlight, there's some really nice comments in the chat. So Beatrice has talked about talked about their plan A as the primary track, plan B as the resilience track, and plan C is the self-directed track. I really like that as a kind of wording, because as Celeste says, it's thinking about not that one plan is more important than the others, but they're all, keeping you going. One is keeping you resilient, one is keeping you self-directed. I really like that as a framework. So it's a great work there. And also, if you want, you might want to think about what careers you haven't considered at all. Often many of us consider that we have to stick in our particular subject area because that's what we know. But my colleague Ruth Wyndon often talks about what she calls the fried egg with ketchup model, which is where you think about how related you want to be to your research area. So previously, when I was doing my PhD and when I was a researcher, I was very hands-on. I was doing research that used the skills in my research area, the knowledge in my research area, very closely related. Some of my friends have moved out into other areas. So, for example, one of my friends is no longer an archaeologist, but works on creating maps and geographical and historical maps as part of her job. She's not working directly in our area, but she's using her subject knowledge and expertise for a different kind of work. I'm now, however, in this outer area where I'm not related to my original research area at all. I was originally an archaeologist. I'm not doing any archaeology in my current job, But what I am doing is I'm using the transferable skills from my PhD or my postdoc. So that's the things like the teaching skills I developed, the project management skills I developed, the administrative skills, the organizational skills. And these are all really valuable in my current job. I wouldn't be able to do it without that PhD. Again, this is one of those things where I think that generative AI can be a really useful tool for helping you figure out what other options are open to you. So I tested this the other day. So I put into Copilot, using the framework that we've done today. I said, I'm currently a PhD researcher working in the environmental sciences with a focus on sustainability. I then wrote my core values. These are made up, but I wrote my core values are compassion, citizenship, fairness, peace, and respect. My ideal career would include lots of time working with local communities and doing qualitative research. I would prefer not to do too much writing. Could you suggest some career options that align with my values and interests? And instantly, it came out with community-focused sustainability roles with job titles here and an explanation of what these jobs do. Then there's something here on research and advocacy roles. Maybe if I want to stay in research a little bit, or maybe I want to do some international humanitarian work. Now, once you have these answers, you can then finesse them further. So for example, you might say, okay, I currently live in South Africa and I am not in a position to move abroad. Could you suggest career options specific to South Africa? And it will finesse these further. And for me, this is a really nice way of figuring out career options that you'd never even heard of, that you never even knew existed. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is to do one of these things. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to either go on LinkedIn, use that alumni function to look for others who used to study at your institution and figure out what are they doing now, what careers are open to them, or use the AI prompt that I will put in the chat, or just write an AI prompt of your own to consider other career options. Or alternatively, if you don't really want to do either of those things, make a list of people you might talk to learn about other career options. So I will put a prompt very quickly in the chat for you, for those of you who want to use an AI tool, and I'll give you just 5 minutes to have a think about that. So we've spent a lot of time today thinking about career planning, and some of these questions may feel big questions. So like I said, they may take a little bit of time to really work around in your head. And I'd really encourage you to go away and speak to colleagues about this, or speak to loved ones, friends, discuss these ideas with them and bounce ideas off of them if you can. Speaking of what's next, I'd like to remind you that career planning is an ongoing process. You know, I work in career development and I'm always thinking about career planning. You know, it's not something that you do today and then that's it. You don't need to do any more planning. It's something that you need to be thinking about, you know, semi-regularly if you can make the time. So the next things that you need to do are continue working on those goals, whether that's drafting the goals themselves or working towards them. Plan those short-term goals out in as much detail as possible. So that document with the table on, I know some of you may not have been able to access it. So what I will do is I will ask one to send that out with the slides so that you've got that to hand as well, and use that to give your goals as much detail as possible. And importantly, and this is a final point I want to leave you with today, use all of this work to manage your time. As researchers, you have so many competing priorities, and I know I felt like this a lot. There were so many exciting things to do, but you don't have enough time in the day to do all of them. So use these goals and use this planning to prioritize and manage your time. When a new opportunity comes up, it is so tempting to say yes to every opportunity that comes up, but having a clear idea of your goals and your plans will help you to be more strategic and help you to take a more active role in your career development. So when a new opportunity comes up, the questions you need to ask yourself are, does it align with your values? Does it interest you? And does it help to achieve your goals? Career planning can help you to move towards having a more purposeful career. It can help you to be more strategic about what you say yes to. So not saying yes to everything, but to the things which are going to help you achieve those goals. It can help you to be adaptable and open-minded by planning for different routes. And it can also help you make time for career development by giving you clear deadlines and plans to work towards. As I said at the beginning of today, you do not need to have your entire career planned out ahead of you, but doing all of these things helps you to have an idea of where you want to go and provide those guiding steps, those first steps towards those longer term goals. I will also send out in the slides some additional resources here, including a guide to career planning and goal setting, our own internal leads guide on writing and development, implementing a career development plan, and also a really great guide from the University of Glasgow on how to have great career conversations. I'm going to do is I am just going to highlight the next seminar, which is run by the wonderful Helith Yaris Griffiths, who's a colleague of mine. She's going to be talking about the tricky subject of handling rejection in academia. So rejection is unfortunately a normal part of academia. How do we handle it? That's taking place on the Tuesday, the 11th of November, and I would really encourage you to sign up for that one, as I think that'll be a really good session knowing Helith. I will hang around for a few minutes if there are any questions that you have, but don't worry, we'll send all the slides and resources out today, and I would really encourage you to keep working on your career planning. Just by turning up today, you have done so much more career planning than most people have done, so you should feel really positive and proud that you've taken the time today to think about these things properly. Don't worry yourself though, if you haven't got clear goals yet. These things take time. Draw on the support of your institution, draw on the support from your friends and family and those around you, and keep thinking about this. So best of luck to all of you in planning out your career goals. Have a really lovely rest of your day, and it's been an absolute pleasure being here with you today. So thank you so much.